Okay, let us begin our class. Good morning, everybody. So, we have been discussing about the methodological approaches to the study of Abhidhamma, right? So, the topic of our discussion last week was the two truths and twofold method. Most of the discussion with regard to the two truths we have covered, right? And we are supposed to complete our discussion with regard to the twofold method that are adopted in the presentation of Abhidhamma teaching, right? And then as soon as we finish the discussion, we will start with the Abhidhammata Sangaha, right? So if you remember, last week I asked you to go through part of it, right? Because then that way it would be easier for all of us to move forward quicker. So any question or any remark based on the discussion in the last class or based on your reading? So it seems like the understanding with regard to the two types of truths is very clear to you. Is it? Any question with regard to this presentation of twofold truth? Which of the two truths you think represent higher reality, higher truth, and why?
Sometimes I think that Paramata Satya seems like most serious to Samadhi Satya because the Paramata is like ultimate. Actually, they are both same, just using a different method to reach the same purpose. The Buddha just the two truth, it doesn't refer two kind of truth, but the Buddha using the two ways to represent the truth. So just like a person even more that you just change another word to show another like five to be is more five to be is. Doesn't mean that superior.
Yeah, right. Any other comment or remark related to this idea of two truth? So what you are saying is that there is actually, no discussion of which of the two truths is higher or which one is lower, but they just represent two ways of looking at the same reality. So in different circumstances, both truths are important, right? Conventional usage of conventional terminologies are important for the conventional living, whereas if you really truly want to understand the reality of nature, it is important that you have an understanding of Paramattha Satya. But when you are studying the Paramattha Satya, it is not completely a different thing, right? It is referring to the same situations or same events that you refer to by using conventional mode of expressions, right? But in both cases, especially in the case of conventional truth, if you emphasize on it too much, and when making use of conventional expressions, if you have this understanding of underlying principles, underlying entity behind your conventional mode of expression, that is a mistake. For example, when we refer to ourselves as I, or a person, when we refer to a certain thing, a tree or a cow, whatever, if that is conventional usage, right? And that is very much important in the daily life. But if we think of a cow to be a permanently existing entity, we are referring to a certain being called cow because there is a certain entity that represent, you can say, cowness within that, and that is real, that is true, that is ever existing. That is a mistake, right? So that is why when you come to the discussion of Paramattha Satya, trying to understand things or trying to understand reality of existence, or even our experiences in terms of functioning of dharmas, this idea of entity, everlasting entity, disappears, right? But then again, there could be another problem with regard to the understanding of dharmas, is that if you take dharmas to be real existent in the sense that they exist separately, independently, right? Because even though you can analyze the common sense experience or the reality of existence in terms of dharmas by following the method of analysis, we also keep in mind that they cannot exist by themselves. There is no independent existence of any particular dharma. Therefore, we have to understand, or we have to take support of this synthesis method, right? So that is the other method that tell us that how all these dharmas in terms of causality, cause and effect, function. You're saying something?
So how one to understand the conventional ultimate exactly
Yes. So if you, that is why I was saying that if you are stuck in the conventional world, then you do not have a way out of it. So the idea is that you have to make use of the conventional terminologies as long as you are in samsara, as long as you are in the world, right? But um, without taking any permanently existing entity or essence to be present there. And to do that, of course, you have to be familiar with Paramattha Satya. Because if you are not familiar with Paramattha Satya, if you are just living in the world of conventions, that means there is no way out. That is why these masters came up with this, presentation of Abhidharma in terms of Paramattha Satyas, right? But once you gain a certain knowledge with regard to Paramattha Satya, you have to again come back to the usage of conventional terms and expressions.
Say the conventional answer.
Yes, true. Because yeah, I think at some point we have discussed that both has separate purposes, but then one is, even though they are separate, one is not without the other. Okay, so the only difference is that yeah, it is because, I mean, what you say, a tree or a cow or a human being, is the object of the analysis in the Paramattha Satya as well, right? There is nothing different or separate from that. And even if you just focus on your own personal existence and personal experience, if you go by the question, who am I? So you are known by a certain name. First of all, you are a human being, right? So that is the category into which you are categorized. You are identified. And then as a male or female, and then by name, by country. So you have all these identities. All these are important, right? On the conventional level. But then, if you want to understand yourself in terms of Paramattha Satya, you come to know that first of all, according to Sutta analysis, you are consisted of Nama and Rupa, or 5 aggregates, or your Indriyas and sense objects, sense data, right? And then finally, in the Abhidharma analysis, you come to know that what is going on in your existence or in your experiences, a certain functioning of dharmas, right? So it is the same you, right? But the problem is that when in the conventional level we refer to ourselves as I, me, mine, in the unconscious level, we have this belief, this understanding that I truly exist. There is something, there is some entity that is present within me. I was small, I am becoming bigger, right? I'm becoming older, right? I was okay yesterday, today I am sick. So it is the same I. There is a certain type of continuity. That is true. But what kind of continuity is there? That is the question. So that is what we can find in the Abhidharma teachings, when they say that it all has to be understood in terms of momentary existence. And then you find how all these dharmas arise and cease following the logic of causality, right? So there is just arising and ceasing of dharmas. And when you understand that, you do not have this idea of entity or identity anymore. But it does not mean that you did not you had an identity before and now it is lost. It was not there from the beginning. So that is why sometimes I say that in a way, when you talk about samsara and nirvana, or soul and soullessness, atta and anatta, when we come to know the Buddhist teaching of Anicca, Dukkha and Anatta, specifically Anatta, because everything is centered on that, right? It is because of the misconception with regard to Atta that there is samsara, there is suffering and everything. So what is important is to remove this idea of self. So sometimes I say that with the concept of Paticca Samuppada and with the concept of Anatta teaching, Buddhism provides a solution to a problem that does not really exist. And why is that? Because Atta is not a real thing that you need to remove. It was not there from the beginning. It is totally a misconception, right? Just realization of that misconception is wisdom. So there are all kinds of methods given to realize that only. If it was that there is Atta, there is an a existing thing called Atta or self, that is a real problem, how you want to remove it, but it is not there. So all these solutions, all these methods are for a problem that does not really exist. It is because of the misconception only. So the only thing is to remove this misconception, right? Confusion. So confusion becomes confusion. In other words, confusion means in Pali, moha or avidya, right? So avidya turns into vijikicha. There are many terms here. Wisdom. Panya. Yes. Any other question or remark? If not, we can start our discussion with regard to the twofold method. More or less, we are familiar with this twofold method, right? Basically, but you would be, very much familiar with these approaches once you really go into the study of Abhidhamma, different text. And now we are going to study this text, Abhidhammatta Sangaha. Basically, we will be following this analytical approach in the beginning, and later on, especially when there is a discussion of Pachayas, you come to know about the synthesis aspect of it. But even before that, when you talk about arising of a particular mind movement, a particular chitta, you identify a particular mind movement as a chitta belonging to a particular state of your existence. For example, very soon we are going to know that how these Abhidhammikas have classified chittas, even though it is just one chitta. Actually, it is just one chitta, and one chitta in the sense that it has a certain function of, chitta or cognitive moment. Otherwise, as an independent entity, it doesn't exist also. How does a chitta function? A consciousness. How do you give rise to a consciousness? How do you have a particular moment of consciousness? When there is contact between indriyas and objects. Based on that, you give rise to a particular moment of consciousness, right? And then when you have a particular moment of consciousness, the consciousness that arose in one single moment can function as a cause for the arising of next thought moment, next mind moment. That is how the continuity of consciousness, or vijnana santati, as it is called, a stream of consciousness that functions, right? Now, it can function in different spheres. So if it has got the qualities of kama vachara, it is considered as a mind movement, as a chitta belonging to kama vachara. Kama vachara means sphere of sensory world, sensuous world. And then similarly you have rupa vachara, a sphere of form world, rupa vachara. So you have rupa vachara chittas only when you enter into rupa jhanas. And then you have arupa vachara chittas, formless jhanas, and then paramatta chittas. Basically 4 broad category of the chittas. So it is the same chitta. It is like when you are happy, it is a happy moment, happy mind moment. And the next moment, when you are sad, it is the sad mind moment. When you are angry, when you feel jealousy, or when you feel, loving kindness, compassion, or generosity in the same mind, just taking different forms, different states of mind. In every single moment, it is not just the mind alone. When you say a mental moment of anger, that means anger is present there, right? And this anger is a chatasika. It is not chitta. It is the chatasika. And in such kind of specific mental moment, it is not just the mind moment, but it is accompanied by a number of chatasikas. So there are some chatasikas that are always present, right? For example, attention. So we discussed it earlier, I think, that if you pass by a road, there are a lot of plants and trees. You do not pay attention to everything, but there are some trees or some plants that you give attention to, and then you remember that, right? And you, when you talk about your journey, you say that I saw this plant there, it was really nice. But there are so many other plants there. So attention is one of the universal chatasika. Anyway, we will come to discuss about all this very quickly. Let us now focus on the discussion of twofold method. So when you talk about the twofold method, out of the 7 books in the Abhidhamma, Theravada Abhidhamma literature, the first book, which is called Dhamma Sangani, and the 7th book, Patthana, represent the 2 methods, namely the method of analysis and the method of synthesis. So the mention of these 2 books are made because it doesn't mean that the other books do not have any specific, adaptation of methods and so on. What it means is that these 2 books primarily represent these 2 specific methods. So these 2 methods, analysis and synthesis, are very much found and very much used in these 2 texts. So therefore, these 2 texts are representative of this two methods. Venerable Yanatiloka says that these two texts represent the quintessence of the entire Abhidhamma. So what it means is that if you have a thorough understanding of the first book, Dhamma Sangani, and Patthana, the seventh book, you can say that you have a clear understanding of Abhidhamma, even if you do not have very, deeper understanding of the other text in between. So why is that? Because first of all, these two texts represent these two methods, and these two approaches, two methods actually represent, how do you say, when we have been studying the Dhamma theory, if you remember, the quintessence or the essential part of Buddha's teaching. So you come to know about soullessness by analysis, but then you come to know about functioning of the world and everything by synthesis. Right? In early Buddhism, if you try to find these two approaches being used in early Buddhist text, I think you have to talk of Anata, the doctrine of Anata, in terms of analysis, and then probably the discussion of dependent origination, Paticcasamuppada or Idapachayata, in terms of synthesis. Because of this, that happens, right? Whereas in the analysis of, in the doctrine of Anatta, you find that Rupa is not self, Vedana is not self, Sanya, Sankara, all the Indriyas, all the objects, all kinds of consciousness that arise based on this combination or communication between Indriyas and objects, all are discussed and presented in terms of Anatta, right? So you can find a kind of relation, or how do you say, between Suttanta and Abhidhamma. And this is Venerable Yanatiloka. He is a German monk. It seems like he was one of the first Western monk who came to study Buddhism. He was in Sri Lanka for many, many years. And he has actually written and translated many books from Pali into German language, including Visuddhimagga. You see all this important text. And he is considered to be Mahinda of the West. Just like Mahinda Thera from India, Asoka's son Mahinda, who brought Buddhism to Sri Lanka, Ceylon, right? And since that time onward, Buddhism, spread all over the world from Sri Lanka, right? They preserved Buddhism in Sri Lanka and the Theravada form of Buddhism. This monk is considered to be Mahinda of the West, of Europe, because he was one of the first few monks, who came in contact with Buddhism, studied Buddhism very seriously, and then contributed a lot for the propagation of Buddhism in the West. And in his book, I think probably you can find this discussion of two methods specifically. One of his famous disciple is Yana Ponika. Yana Ponika was his student. Abhidhamma is regarded as philosophy, but in what sense? It is connected to phenomenology and ontology. We have discussed it earlier, how Abhidhamma is considered as philosophy, and also what is the term that was used? Psychoethical philosophy, I think, right? Psychology and ethical philosophy, yes. It is connected to phenomenology and ontology. We will come to discuss about it very soon. Phenomenology deals with phenomena, that is, with the world of internal and external experience. So phenomenology basically concerns with one's own experiences. It could be internal experience, it could be external experience, right? And ontology or metaphysics deals with existence and nature of an essence or ultimate principle underlying the phenomenal world. So two things here. One is what you experience, and the other is what do you experience, or who experiences? Where does this experience takes place? In other words, phenomenology is concerned with what happens in the world of our experience and how it happens, and ontology concerns that how it happens cannot be answered adequately without understanding the underlying essence. So how changes to why. Right? So the dharmas, the theory of dharma is an approach to explain this ontology, how things really happen. Right? The primary concerns of Abhidharma is phenomenology. The most important term Dhamma in Abhidharma, which includes both corporeal and mental things, may be rendered as phenomena. However, two reservations should be kept in mind while regarding Abhidharma as phenomenology. Nibbana is listed under the Asankhata Dhatu in the Dhamma Sangani. Being a Lokuttara Dhamma, it is regarded as a metaphysical or transcendental entity. It is not included in the three worlds of the universe, Kamavachara, Rupavachara, and Arupavachara. Wherever it is mentioned in the Dhamma Sangani, it is mentioned just for the sake of completeness of the enumeration of things. Unlike other Dhammas without so much explanation, the classifications of Nibbana are all negative in character. It is not a Dhamma in the sense of a mental object. In the discussion of Paramatta Chitta, actually, when you are in meditation, when you are in the state of Paramatta consciousness, Paramatta consciousness is a consciousness that is present in the beings of this four maggas and four phalas, right? Sotapatti magga, Sotapatti phala, Sakadagami magga, Sakadagami phala, Anagami magga, Anagami phala, Arahatta magga, Arahatta phala. The object of their meditation is said to be Nibbana, but here if you look at this statement, it is not a Dhamma in the sense of a mental object. So in a way, what it says here is that even though Nibbana is mentioned together with other three, Paramatta truth, right? It should be understood in the sense of, not the others. Okay, so what is Nibbana? Nibbana is not Chitta, Chatasika, or Rupa, right? So the fourth one. So that is how it is presented here. So there is so much of discussion on Nibbana, but all with negative expressions. So you have, for example, the discussion of Lobha, Dosa, Moha, and the discussion of Samsara. And what is Nibbana is, it is not Samsara. It is, it is without Lobha, Dosa, and Moha. Okay, so, yeah. Yeah, dosa loba kayo dosa kayo maha kayo tinibbana. In fact, here it is made very clear that where here it is mentioned just for the sake of completeness of the enumeration of things. So, in other words, I think you can understand that when you are talking about conventional truth, ultimate truth, to realize and to understand what. So, what is going on in the conventional level is because of confusion. On the Paramattha level, there is an effort made to overcome this confusion, and then when the confusion is overcome, there is no confusion, right? So it will be considered as it will be explained as without confusion, right? That which does not have confusion. So that means it is not something, because most of the time I think people have this idea that there is something called Nibbana, right? Somewhere in some place. So you can see it in terms of being present always within us. That is the idea. It is right here, right now. The only thing is that because of samuti or samvriti, it is covered, concealed, because of ignorance, because of confusion, because of all this anusaya, kilesa, and everything. So Yanapunika states, we have to admit that this sole non-phenomenal entity belongs likewise to the system of the Abhidhamma, but, and this is relevant in our connection, it is never charged upon because Nibbana is an object of realization, not of philosophical research. Yeah, so whatever discussion you'd like to have with regard to Nibbana can become pointless because it is not something that should be understood theoretically, even though there are a lot of books written on Nibbana. Finally, you would find that what they have explained is that they have explained only what is not Nibbana, to say that all these do not represent Nibbana. Okay.
So, in what sense that there is a concept of consciousness that's the use that in which form and reality.
Now you can look at it from different perspective, basically from two ways. One is that you are in samsara and that is real for you. You exist truly. You experience pain and pleasure, right? But you come to know that you are in samsara, you are in pain, you are in suffering. There is a way out of suffering. You follow that approach, follow that path, and you get out of suffering. So this is one way of understanding, linear way. That is what is mostly discussed in the early Buddhist text, right? In the time of Abhidharma, from the perspective of Paramattha Satya, what they are saying is that you do not really exist. It is all the functioning of dharmas, right? So you have a different understanding, different approach. It is all the functioning of dharmas, and when you truly understand that, that is liberation, right? Because you do not superimpose any self entity anywhere, right? And then in the period of Acharya Nagarjuna, it is the other way of looking at it, that There is no samsara at all. There is even no nirvana also. Because the nirvana is also a concept, because you are in samsara, right? So you need to have something to overcome this problem. Once you get rid of this problem, you come to know that this was all made up, there was no problem at all. You see? So two ways means, one is when you look at the entire thing as a samsaric being, right? There is a progress from samsara to nirvana. That is one way of understanding it. So all this language, expression, everything matters. And you need a term called nirvana. So from the perspective of samsara, you can say that nirvana actually does not exist. How do you say that? Because according to the explanation, for example, it doesn't have any particular description that how it looks like, what are its characteristics and whatever. No explanation. So therefore, how can it exist? And this thought is because we are in samsara, we are thinking of nirvana in terms of samsara, in terms of existence, some other type of existence. You understand? So therefore, for the sake of enumeration, you need to include it as a dharma to say that there are a number of dharmas, 4 categories of paramattha satcha, chitta, chaitasika, rupa, and nirvana. These are the 3 sankata. Once you understand their limitation, their functioning, their, how do you say, manifestation, whatever, all these are illusion. That is the realization, that is nirvana. So there is something called nirvana. So that way, you can say that for the sake of enumeration. Enumeration means actually listing. Okay, you have this expression nirvana. So this is one way of understanding. But from the perspective of ultimate truth or highest truth, you can say that what is real is only nirvana, right? Now here it says that it is just for the sake of enumeration you use the term nirvana. So nirvana is also a term, a concept, right? So from the perspective of samsara, it could be another kind of a state. If it is not, what is it? We do not know. But from the perspective of nirvana, samsara is a total confusion that does not really exist. It is all false. What is truth in it is nirvana. So two ways of looking at it.
There is the first analysis world, since and in order to have the opposite of or in order to just make a complete of this then we put this
Yes, it is necessary also, because otherwise I think there will be full of chaos. If somebody just say that, that is not right, that is not true, that is not true, you are all wrong, you do not exist, you do not eat, you do not do anything. There is that kind of teacher also. Some days ago, I think I posted a message on my Facebook also. There was one, in the time of the Buddha also, there were some samana ascetics like that, you see, Purana Kassapa, Makale Gosala. And this person, especially in the modern time, he passed away also. U.J. Krishnamurti, yes. So he was saying that all these are nonsense. All the religious systems, all good, all bad, nothing. He is rejecting everything. And he is so furious when he talks. So I was thinking, oh my goodness, this is, there is another Krishnamurti. You listen to his Jiddu Krishnamurti. Very logical, very systematic, even though he does not provide any kind of method. He does not provide any kind of method. because his approach is also in a way like Acharya Nagarjuna. Why do you need method? Who needs method? Who exists? Why so much of confusion? Why there is a discussion of existence and non-existence? So from that perspective, but very difficult to follow him, very difficult to understand him. You need to be really, really mindful to listen to him, because very systematic and very logical. It's like the entire discussion of 1 hour, 2 hours centered on the same point. So yes, when you talk about nirvana from the perspective of samsara, it doesn't exist. If you talk about its existence, the only thought is somebody is saying something. Yeah. So the only thought that he can have is that nibbana is a certain type of existence, which is wrong, which is also because of our limitation of thinking and confusion, right? But from the perspective of realized person, what is truth is only nirvana, right? All this samsaric existence is confusion. So two ways of looking at it. That is what you find in the Nagarjuna's teaching, and that is why it is very difficult to understand his teaching, right? Because he looks at things from the perspective of wisdom, from the perspective of emptiness, nirvana, everything. Okay, so the penetrative phenomenological investigations in the Abhidharma contribute to an understanding of the ontological problems, that is to search for an abiding essence in reality. The results of Abhidharma philosophy show that there cannot be found an essence in the world of the five aggregates. Yeah, so when you talk about everything to be just constantly, floating or arising and ceasing, no permanent entity, then there is the question of what is really real, right? So if you are talking about experiences, where do they take place? Who experiences, right? Is there any experiencer? If there is no experiencer of anything, can you really talk about experiences? You talk of experience only if there is experiencer, right? So the connection between phenomenological experiences and ontological existence. Now look at this quotation here. Let's see what we can get from this quotation. The most sublime states of meditative consciousness, so frequently identified with the manifestation of or the mystic union with a deity of a personal or impersonal nature, are included in those five phenomenal objects of clinging and excluded from the sphere of the unconditioned element. At the same time, the thorough analysis of all phenomena undertaken in the Abhidhamma leaves no doubt as to what Nibbana definitely is not. It is true that these ontological results of the Abhidhamma are merely negative, but they represent certainly more substantial and consequential contributions to the ontological problem than the positive assertions of many metaphysical systems indulging in unprovable or fallacious conceptual speculations. Yeah. So the truth, if you are really talking about ontological existence, and that too is in the conventional terms, right? The nirvana, or how do you say, the complete awareness, which is the truth. So some people say it as universal consciousness, right? just awareness. How do you say it? In a way, it is the force within the nature itself. It is the energy within the nature itself, within the cosmos itself. You understand? Because we are no different from this cosmos. We think we are different. We think we have this self-identity, right? We think that I am observing something. I see things, I experience things. Whereas we forget to think that I'm also part of it. I'm also the part of the entire system. And in this cosmic play, you can say, everything is happening. Somebody is becoming people, somebody is becoming tree, somebody is becoming something else, right? In this cosmic play, as it is happening, as it is going on. Who is controlling this entire cosmos? So as everything is going on, happening as they are, we are also just part of it. We just have to realize it. We just have to be free from this confusion that I exist separately. So this as it isness is the ontological truth. And phenomenological experiences are the remaining ones as we experience them in terms of so many things, so many ways, using our senses, indriyas, sense organs, and so on, right? In our thoughts, in our minds, all kinds of emotions. Then when you are merged or when you are free from this idea of self, then there is no pleasure or displeasure, no femininity or masculinity, no I or others, right? Probably, but I'm not very sure if we can really call it actually universal consciousness or not. I do not have clear idea about it. Yeah. I see. So why I say that I'm not sure about this universal consciousness, is that I'm not even sure actually if it can be called a universal consciousness or not. That is why I'm saying that it could be a kind of the cosmic play or universal force as it isness, so I do not know if it can be referred to as universal consciousness also. I'm not very sure about it, you see. So because then we have this idea that there is something called universal consciousness that is present, that is permanent forever, you see. So I'm not sure in what respect actually he explains that. I try to understand his talk. It is not easy to understand his talk, I know. And I think that he has got a certain realization, obviously, otherwise people cannot talk in that way. Yeah. Yeah. So the context, we need to understand the context, in what context he's talking about it. Because in any case, you are talking in terms, right, in language. And the problem is that, for example, if a realized person also is saying something about his realization, we are always going to understand it from our own, shortcomings, with our own shortcomings, own limitations. That is the problem, you see. So that is why, I don't know, many people use so many different terms. Now I'm just trying to refer to it as it isness, and it has all the potentialities of everything, all the potentialities or everything, right? So, but in a way that also makes things easier to understand, right? Clearer. Sensory, what is that? Sensory consciousness and universal consciousness. Yeah. Anyway, so there is a question here with regard to different types of truths and existence. This is from Asin Rattasara. What if the two levels of truth are like levels connected by ladders? We, the unenlightened, are at the lower level and have to climb to the upper level. But what if once we get there, there is another ladder leading upwards? It could be also, but my remark would be that if you do not really exist, if it is all confusion, why do you need any ladders to move forward? There should be no one to move forward, right? There is no forward, no backward, right? So if it is all a confusion, the main purpose is to be able to free from this confusion and see how do you function if you don't exist, right? How do you do things without you being present? This is really interesting. I think that this topic, this type of discussion should be the subject matter in every school, everywhere, so that rather than following this worldly life, all are focused on realizing themselves and be free from the samsara. The Abhidhamma is not a speculative but a descriptive philosophy. Two complementary methods are used to describe phenomena, that of analysis and that of investigating the relations or the conditionality of things. These two methods are evident especially in the first and the last books of the Abhidhamma Pitaka, Dhamma Sangani and Patthana. Yeah, so these are the two texts, Dhamma Sangani and Patthana. Now, this is an example of how teachings are presented in this text. This is in Dhamma Sangani here. Katame Dhamma Kusala Yasming Samaye Kamavacharang Kusalang Chittang Uppannang Hoti Somanassa Sahagatang Yana Sampayuttang Ruparammanang Va Saddharammanang Va Gandharammanang Va Rasarammanang Va Pottabbarammanang Va Dhammarammanang Va Yang Va Panarabha. Tasming Samaye Passo Hoti Vedana Hoti Sanya hoti, Chetana hoti, Chittang hoti, Vitakko hoti, Vicharo hoti, Piti hoti, Sukang hoti, Vittase Kagata hoti, Saddindriyang hoti, Viryandriyang hoti, Satindriyang hoti. So all these are Chetasika, right? So the question here is Katame Dhamma Kusala. What are the Dhammas that represent wholesomeness, that are wholesome in nature? So wholesome is a term that is used. What kind of chittas are wholesome? What kind of dhammas are wholesome? And under this, there are a lot of dharmas, a number of dhammas mentioned. So this is particularly the discussion of kusala, chitta and chetasika in the Kamavachara world. Kusala mind movement. You see how in terms of analysis dharmas are presented. So this is just an example to show the method of analysis that is followed, or that is found in the Dhamma Sangani. Yeah, so this is in English. Which are the things that are wholesome? So the dharmas are translated, the word dhamma is translated as things here. In some texts, you would find the word phenomena. At a time when a state of wholesome consciousness belonging to the sensuous sphere has arisen, accompanied by joy and associated with knowledge. Referring to any one object, be it an object of sight, sound, smell, and so on. All these factors arise. Passa, Vedana, Sanya, Chetana, Chitta, Vitakka, Vichara, Piti, Sukha, Ekaggata. 56. These, whatever other conditionally arisen uncorporeal things there at that time, these things are wholesome. Samma Ditti, see? Samma Sankappa, Samma Vayama, Samma Sati. All these are counted as separate factors. Saddindriya, Virya Indriya, Satindriya, faculty of faith, faculty of energy, mindfulness, and so on. All these represent kusala aspect. Non-greed, non-hatred, non-delusion. The Patthana exemplifies the use of the second method, the method of synthesis. Dependent on a wholesome phenomena, there arises a wholesome phenomena conditioned by root, etc. For example, dependent on any one wholesome group, such as perception, etc., there arise three other wholesome groups: feelings, mental formations, consciousness, conditioned by way of root. So this is to show that no any single dharma exists and function on its own. So this is how it is presented in Patthana. Siya kusalang dhammang paticca kusalo dhammo uppajjaya hetu paccaya. Siya kusalang dhammang paticca akusalo dhammo uppajjaya hetu paccaya. Siya kusalang dhammang paticca avyakato dhammo upajjaya hetupajjaya, siya kusalang dhammang paticca, kusalocha abhyakatocha dhamma, upajjayung hetupajjaya, akusalocha abhyakatocha dhamma, kusalocha akusalocha dhamma, kusalocha akusalocha abhyakatocha dhamma, upajjayung hetupajjaya. So this represents the complexity of functioning of dharmas. Sometimes kusala, sometimes akusala, sometimes abhyakata, right? Sometimes even a mixture of a certain different types of chittas arise and cease depending on different conditions. Yeah, depending on faultless state, may there arise faultless state by root condition. So this is the explanation with regard to the root condition. Root is called hetu. So there are so many different conditions that are present. So many conditions could be present in one mind moment, but it is categorized or understood in terms of the condition that is functioning as a main force. So this is the monk I was talking about. This is the disciple of the previous monk, Yana Tiloka. Now this is Yana Punika. This is his book, Abhidhamma Studies, Researches in Buddhist Psychology. The first method shows what is happening when we say consciousness has arisen. What are the constituents of that event which is seemingly a unitary, non-composite nature? When you say that a thought moment has arisen, in that thought moment, how many chetasikas are present? What is its nature? That is the description that you can find in the Dhamma Sangani. Even though you just come to know that there is this single mind moment, the Dhamma Sangani tells us that this single mind moment is actually constituted of so many factors, right? So that is by way of analysis. The second method shows how or under what condition the event is happening. What these two methods show in Yana Punika's words is a complete description of a thing requires, besides its analysis, also a statement of its relations to certain other things. Second method shows that under what condition this mind moment or this meta moment or this event is happening. It explains the conditions. According to Venerable Yana Punika, one needs to have a clear understanding of both, because if one just understand one method and does not pay attention to the other approaches, one may have a misunderstanding or not a complete understanding of the occurrence of single things is rejected in the Abhidharmic exposition. They are artificially isolated for the purpose of analytical description, and their relations are discussed in the Patthana. So look at this expression here, artificially isolated. They do not have separate existence, but they are artificially isolated for the purpose of having clearer understanding of what is happening, okay, in that particular moment or in that event. The non-existence of things in isolation is implicit in the analysis of Dhamma Sangani. It states in a single psychic unit or in a single moment of consciousness, and multiple mental factors are active and they are related through the process of interdependence. Yeah. It is further clarified in the commentary by defining samaya as samuha. So here the discussion is on this expression here. Yasasming samaye. So samaya is generally translated as occasion, on that occasion, right? On that occasion, or time. Samaya also means time. At that time, on that occasion. But here, look at the commentarial exposition of samaya. It says that samaya should be understood as samuha. So on that occasion means on that aggregation. So samaya, the word samaya itself in the Dhamma Sangani suggests that that moment, that event represent an aggregation of so many Dharma factors. Samaya should be understood in terms of sama. So these are just some further explanation. Okay, so in the commentary, you would find this exposition with regard to these methods and arising of a particular dharma. So what this commentary states here is that nothing arises from a single cause. Ekakaranavado patisedito hoti. Nothing arises from a single cause. So therefore, when you talk about universal consciousness, I don't know, there could be some amount of misunderstanding, I'm not sure. Nothing arises from a single cause. Nothing exists or moves by its own power. Yeah. No thing arises singly. What these three axioms suggest is the principle of conditionality, idapachayata, and the fundamental Buddhist doctrine of impersonality. As I said, you can relate these two methods to early Buddhist teaching of anatta and idapachayata, conditionality. The analysis as undertaken in the Dhamma Sangani shows that the smallest accessible psychic unit, a moment of consciousness, is as little indivisible atomos, uniform and undifferentiated as the material atom of modern physics. Like the physical atom, a moment of consciousness is a correlational system of its factors, functions, energies, or aspects. Whatever other name we choose to give to the components of that hypothetical psychic unit, in the Abhidhamma, these components are called simply Dhamma, that is things or states. I think this paragraph, this passage explains it very clearly, right? Smallest accessible psychic unit, mind to moment, okay? So you can call it by different names. In the Theravada Abhidhamma, it is called a Dhamma. In English, things or states. It should be noted, however, that the Patthana, the principal work of Buddhist conditionalism, is not so much concerned with the relations within a single psychic unit, which we shall call internal relation, but deals with external relations, that is, with the connection between several of such units. But these external relations are to a great extent dependent on the internal relations of the given single unit or of previous ones, that is, on the modes of combination and the relative strength of the different mental factors within a single moment of consciousness. This shows that the analytical method is as important for the relational one as the later is for the first. So this shows how both are really connected to each other. So in the Dhamma Sangani, you have this discussion of every single moment, right, in the existence, and how many dharmas that are present within a single moment, smallest psychic moment, psychic unit. But in the Patthana, as it says, it is probably the focus is more on the causal connection between different moments. Okay, but when you talk about different moments, one moment is functioning as a cause for the arising of the following moment. You are talking about the functioning and the existence of each moment as well. Thank you for your attention. So, any question or discussion? Do you like to share your thoughts on last week's and today's discussion? Otherwise, we will have a break, and after that, we will continue with the book. You want to have a break? Any question or remark from the online students? You also want to have a break? That I'm not sure, because we are now trying to understand this presentation of dharmas by the Abhidharmikas, right? So if you have this question of dividing the dharmas further, I think the only way is to be a realized person, and then see how these things can be done, because these are subject of realization actually. We're just trying to understand theoretically. In three characteristics, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta, we know the origin of Dukkha is craving. I want to know what are the origin of Anicca and Anatta and their root cause. What is the origin of Anicca and Anatta? Origin of Anatta? So, yeah, Sabbe Sankara Anicca, Sabbe Sankara Dukkha, Sabbe Sankara Anatta. You need to look at the Anatta Lakkana Sutta. There are some other suttas, probably Grimananda Sutta, that discuss about these things, the three universal characteristics of phenomenal existence. Now, when you talk about Anicca, impermanence, what is Anicca? Primarily, the focus is 5 aggregates, right? Nama Rupa. So these 5 aggregates are said to be impermanent. But then, what is the connection between Anicca and Dukkha? If the 5 aggregates are impermanent, that is the nature of the 5 aggregates. Why there need to be any kind of suffering? Because there is craving, there is attachment, there is clinging, there is desire that, I do not want to change. I do not want to become sick. I want to exist forever. I do not want to die. Because of this, and this results from confused mind, ignorant mind, right? Because of our ignorance, we do not understand the reality as it is. Therefore, we cling to these aggregates to be permanent and so on. And when our desire does not meet the reality, we want something, but in actuality, something else happens, then we suffer. And the final statement, Anatta, says that something that is constantly changing, because of which there is suffering, it cannot be regarded as Atta. So it is not that there is Atta that is not present. What is these statements tell us is that it was a confused belief. It was a confusion. It was because of confusion that we believe in the existence of Atta, but it is not there. So it is called superimposition. Superimposition of this idea of self. So what do you think is the origin of Anicca? Origin of Anicca, in my opinion, is the very nature of things is impermanent, changing, but it is the very nature. Now, if you talk about origin of Anicca, I don't know, probably it would be, this is how you see it. I want to have something to be permanent, but it is changing and I do not like it. But if the very nature of things is changing, we do not have any expectation or anything, then there should not be any problem. And Anata is clearly, what is the origin of Atta is a misconception, wrong understanding. Anata is just opposite of Atta. No Atta. My question is not relating with today's slide, but I'd like you to example Magan Pala. How does it work with jhana? Can you elaborate more? Okay. So, yeah, now there are two approaches. I think most of you are familiar with samatha and vipassana meditation approach. So when you talk about jhana, basically you relate to the practice of samatha. When you talk about vipassana, that means vipassana is more concerned with attainment of different stages, Sotapatti, Sakadagami, Anagami, and so on, right? So, but you can have Sotapatti, Sakadagami, Anagami, Arahant with jhana as well. That means that you practice samatha and also you practice vipassana, right? So you would find in the Pali Buddhist literature there are many arahants who are called Sukha Vipassaka or Suddha Vipassaka, dry insight practitioner. These are monks who do not have jhana, who do not have psychic power. Okay? They are just liberated beings, arahants. Again, you would find arahants like Chalabinya and Chalabinya, Tevijju arahant, those who have jhanas, those who have psychic power, and they are arahants as well. So it is just a matter of focusing on the development of jhanic stages, and then following the vipassana, or not doing too much jhana, too much samatha, focusing on just vipassana, just these approaches. Sabbang ekattang, sabbang pututtang. Sabbang ekattang refers to the theory of monism, right? Monism means, as we have been discussing, everything is coming from one source. That is, all are one. All you can reduce to one or relate to one. That is sabbang ekattang. Sabbang pututtang means when you divide, you have different dharmas and so on. And if you consider them existing separately, that is sabbang pututtang. Radical pluralism. So this is only, how do you say? Psychological analysis, mental analysis, as we have been discussing, they do not exist separately. Believing the dharmas to exist separately results into sabbang pututtang. Okay, I think we need to have a break. So many questions come. We'll talk about the remaining things after the break. Okay, so we are going to start reading the book Abhidhamma Sangaha. I think you all have the book, right? So you are supposed to go through some pages. It is good if you before coming to class, if you go through some pages of the book, it would be easier for all of you to have better understanding. So before the break, there was a last question with regard to Nyaya Vaisheshika, their thoughts and their realization of the Nyaya Vaisheshika thinkers. I'm not sure, probably they would have certain kind of realization, but if you are talking about Buddhist spiritual practice, we talk about, for example, these 4 maggas and 4 phalas. I'm not sure if they had this kind of realization. They might have some other kind of realization probably, but I'm not very sure. When they are talking about these things, either there could be philosophers or practitioners. So that is my understanding. Now, yes. So this is the book. We are going to start reading. Let's see how many pages we can complete, how far we can go. Okay, let's read this together and discuss together. So this is Chitta Sangaha Vibhaga, Compendium of Consciousness. Let us read the verse together. Samma Sambuddhang Atulang Sasadhamma Ganuttamang Abhivadiya Bhasisang Abhidhammatta Sangaha. Now this is called Thutivachana, words of praise. This is by Anuruddha Thera, who composed this text. So this is the verse, remembering the Buddha, paying respect to the Buddha. He composed this verse. So what it says here, Having respectfully saluted the fully enlightened one, the peerless one, along with the sublime teaching and the noble order, I will speak the Manual of Abhidhamma, a compendium of the things contained in the Abhidhamma. So before starting to discuss about Abhidhamma, he was paying respect to the Buddha here. And now what follows is an explanation of the verse. So this can be understood as a kind of commentarial exposition with regard to the verse that we have recited just now. For example, when it says Abhivadya, Abhivadana, respectful salutation, right? So not big enough? Okay. Yeah. So here is an explanation with regard to respectful salutation. It is an established practice in the Pali Buddhist tradition for expositors of the Dhamma to begin their expositions with a verse of homage to the Triple Gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, the ultimate refuge for all who seek the undistorted comprehension of actuality. This is actually a representative of how commentarial exposition, is, what you can find in the commentarial description, because most of the times when we look at the root text, suttas, for example, and so on, in most cases, the suttas are presented in a way simpler, terms and simpler expressions, explanations. We tend to have a kind of a very general and simplistic understanding of the teaching that is presented within sutta. So that is why we need to be able to look at the commentary as well. And now most of the commentaries have been translated. Here, as you can see, when talking about Abhivadya, respectful salutation, what is explained here is that most of the Dharma teachers or expositors, here expositor means commentators, right? Commentators, basically expositors of the Dhamma, when they compose a certain text, they generally begin with paying salutation to the Buddha. What is the reason? Because they seek the undistorted comprehension of actuality. So this is a very I think significant expression here, undistorted comprehension of actuality. What is the other term that you can think of? Yatha bhutayana dasana, understanding or seeing things as they are, right? Yatha bhuta. That is the main purpose. Otherwise, what is the need for taking refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha? That should be the sole purpose. It is just like when you join this BA program, the sole purpose is to complete it, right? To complete it, to learn something, to have a certificate, to have a good grade, right? That should be the purpose, not just wasting time. In a similar way, what is the purpose of studying or composing this text? Not just to show one's mastery on language or thoughts, but to seek the undistorted comprehension of actuality. Okay, undistorted. Keep this in mind, undistorted, not distorted. Thus, following this custom, with deep devotion, the author, Acharya Anuruddha, opens his treatise with a verse of praise in which he expresses his veneration for the Triple Gem. A thought of veneration directed towards a worthy object is a wholesome karma that generates merit in the mental continuum of the person who gives rise to such a thought. Why do you do that? One reason mentioned is that You want to have undistorted comprehension of actuality, and also you want other people to have similar kind of understanding with regard to the teaching. And by paying respect to the respected ones, you gain a certain kind of merits, right? You pay respect to somebody or something because you have a kind of good feeling towards that, right? And by doing that, you accumulate merits because it is considered as a wholesome karma. When this veneration is directed towards the most worthy objects of homage, the triple gem, the merit generated is vast and powerful. When it happens with regard to the triple gem, because the triple gem here is regarded as the most worthy objects of homage, you generate vast merits, vast amount of merits, right? Such merit accumulated in the mind has the capacity to ward off obstructions to the fulfillment of one's virtuous undertakings and to support their successful completion. This again is a very powerful statement here. If you really truly understand the power of triple gem, if you are really convinced by the power of triple gem, the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, if you really take refuge into them, you would have the kind of motivation and power and strength to move forward, to continue with your work. In this case, to complete this text, okay, compilation of this text. Moreover, for a follower of the Buddha, the writing of a book on the Dhamma is a valuable opportunity to develop the perfection of wisdom, Panya Parami. Okay. Therefore, when beginning his work, the author expresses the blissful words of praise, his joy at gaining such an opportunity. When you write a book explaining the teaching of the Buddha, you fulfill the Panya Paramita, perfection of wisdom. But before writing a book on the teaching of the Buddha, one has to gain sufficient amount of knowledge. Otherwise, if you misrepresent the teaching of the Buddha, it would be like holding a snake by its tail. Okay, rather than accumulating merits, you accumulate demerits, papa, akusala, right? So that is why one has to be very careful first. One has to be aware if one has really understood the teaching fully. Now you have some explanation with regard to this expression Samma Sambuddha. Who is Samma Sambuddha? What is the meaning of fully enlightened one? The Buddha is called the fully enlightened one because he is the one who has fully understood by himself the ultimate nature of all phenomena, both in their particular and universal characteristics. So this is an explanation from the commentator or expositor. I think if you talk about Dharma, in Abhidharmic terms, it would be like the characteristics of every single Dharma, and also in general, all the Dharmas to be, constantly changing and so on. So, ultimate nature of all phenomena, right? Both in their particular and universal characteristics. Yes, I think so. The term implies the direct knowledge of all realities gained without help from a teacher. So in the case of Samma Sambuddha, he came up with his realization of this phenomena without a teacher, right? The Buddha is also called the Peerless One, Atula, because his qualities and attributes cannot be matched by any other being. Atula, Atulaniya, Atula, incomparable. Though all Arahants possess the distinguished qualities of morality, concentration, and wisdom sufficient to result in liberation, none possess the innumerable and immeasurable virtues with which a supreme Buddha is fully endowed. For example, the 10 Tathagatas powers of knowledge, the 4 grounds of self-confidence, the attainment of great compassion, and the unobstructed knowledge of omniscience. Hence, the Buddha is without a peer among all sentient beings. As it is said, there is one person, Bhikkhus, who is unique, without a peer, without counterpart, incomparable, unequaled, matchless, unprevailed, the best of humans, the Tathagata, the Arahant, the fully enlightened one. There are some suttas describing the qualities of the Buddha, but if you want to know, more about the qualities of the Buddha, there is a book that I can suggest to you that is called the Buddha in Theravada tradition, right? By Professor Endo. You can look at that text. Buddha in Theravada Buddhism. Huh? Yeah. So this is the book, Buddha in Theravada Buddhism. The sublime teaching, Sabdhamma. The teaching of Dhamma signifies the 3 aspects of study, practice, and realization. Yes. Study is the study of the Tipitaka, the scriptures which record the teachings of the Buddha, comprising the 3 collections of the Vinaya, the Suttas, and the Abhidhamma. Practice is the threefold training in virtue, concentration, and wisdom. Realization is the penetration of the supramundane paths and attainment of the noble fruits. Each of these is the foundation for the next. Since the study provides the guidelines to practice, and the practice brings the breakthrough to realization, the teaching is called sublime in the sense of true and good, because when it is applied in accordance with the Buddha's instructions, it definitely leads to the attainment of Nibbana, the supreme truth and highest good. So everything is made very clear here, very precisely written. When talking about Sabdhamma, 3 aspects are mentioned. One is Pariyatte, the other is Patipatte, the other is Pativeda. What we are doing here is, for example, Pariyatti primarily, but also Patipatti, you can say that. I always say that when you are studying, you are also practicing actually, because you are trying to understand the teaching of the Buddha, right? So if you have that mind, that thought in your mind, that when we are studying, we are not studying for the sake of passing the exam, but trying to understand what the Buddha is, telling us, what all these enlightened masters are telling us, right? So that itself becomes practice. It becomes a kind of a Dhamma Sakacha, okay, discussion on Dhamma teaching. Okay, and as it is mentioned here, all these are connected. If you look at the suttas as well, the Buddha or his disciples first give teaching, and then a lot of people come to listen to their teaching. And once they have a certain understanding, once they are convinced by the teaching, at the end of the discussion, they go to the Buddha and say that, I want to become your disciple. I want to follow your path, right? Because what you said appeared to be convincing to me, right? So that is what you see. So a study has a purpose. If we take that in that direction, rather than just taking it as a kind of, a theoretical study, or a study for the purpose of for the academic purposes. Okay, so a study would aspire you to go into practice, and once you take up the practice, you would go into realization. So when talking about Saddhamma, it is referring to all these three aspects: the study of the text, and practice in terms of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. So that is very precisely mentioned. Of course, there are so many different ways and presentations you can find in different Buddhist texts. Sila, Samadhi, Panya is a very basic one, very fundamental one. And Pativeda realization here refers to the realization of 4 maggas and 4 phalas. Ganuttama, noble order. The word Gana, meaning company or group, is used here as a synonym of Sangha. The community or order, there are 2 kinds of Sangha: the conventional Sangha, the order of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, fully ordained monks and nuns, and the Sangha of noble ones, Arya Sangha, referred to in the verse of homage as the noble order. So twofold Sangha, conventional Sangha and Arya Sangha. Conventional Sangha represent all the monks, nuns that are present in different Buddhist countries, non-Buddhist countries. Arya Sangha refers to those monks and nuns who have entered into the path, okay, who have become from Putujana to noble one. The noble order is noble or holy community of the accomplished followers of the Buddha. That is the 4 pairs of persons who have arrived at the plains of the noble ones, distinguished as eightfold according to whether they have reached the paths or the fruits of stream entry, once returning, non-returning, and arhanship. So this is very clear. In terms of Magga and Phala, there are 8. And then he says, I will speak the Manual of Dhamma. Now here you would find an interesting remark made. The title of the work, Abhidhamma Sangha, literally means a compendium of the things contained in the Abhidhamma, that is, in the Buddha's special or distinguished teaching, Abhidhamma, handed down in the Abhidhamma Pitaka. The author's statement, I will speak, Bhasi's son, reminds us that our text is meant to be recited and learned by heart, so that it will always be available to us as an instrument for analyzing reality. So this is the ultimate purpose of this author. First of all, he is reciting or speaking the text. Okay, and why this is emphasized is, if you recite and learn by heart, it would be available as an instrument for analyzing reality. So you can always refer to the text. Now the text itself is actually not very big. If you look at the Pali version, the text itself is not very big, the Pali text. In this book, in this Abhidhamma Sangha translation, which is edited by Bhikkhu Bodhi, it contains a lot of commentarial exposition and also exposition by the translators. Okay, so it appeared to be quite big, but they provided all these explanations to make the teaching clearer. Okay, so that is with regard to the beginning verse. Now here you would find an introduction to 4 kinds of reality, right? 4 paramatta, fourfold ultimate reality. Chatuda paramatta. Let us read the verse together again. Tatha Buddha Abhidhammatta Chatuda paramattato Chittang Chetasikang Rupang Nibbanang iti Sabbata. So what are the 4 ultimate realities? Chitta, Chetasika, Rupa and Nibbana. In translation it says, the things contained in the Abhidhamma spoken of therein are altogether fourfold from the standpoint of ultimate reality, consciousness, mental factors, matter and Nibbana. As we are going through this text, reading and discussing, if you would like, you can make some notes, okay, accordingly, just important points, in case if you want to, keep them in mind, or for future reference, you can make some specific notes. From the standpoint of ultimate reality, means according to Abhidhamma philosophy, there are 2 kinds of realities. We have already studied them, Sammuti and Paramatta, right? Conventional realities are the reference of ordinary conceptual thought, Panyati, and conventional modes of expression, Bohara. They include such entities as living beings, persons, man, woman, animals, and the apparently stable, persisting objects that constitute our unanalyzed picture of the world. Okay, so this is also an important expression here, unanalyzed picture of the world. So conventional realities represent an analyzed picture of the world. The Abhidhamma philosophy maintains that these notions do not possess ultimate validity, for the objects which they signify do not exist in their own right as irreducible realities, because they are analyzable. They do not exist as irreducible realities. Therefore, they do not have ultimate validity. Their mode of being is conceptual, not actual. They are products of mental construction, parikappana, not realities existing by reason of their own nature. Okay, so from imagination, imaginary world, transforming from imaginary world to real world. Okay, so in the conventional world, things exist as mental construction. Ultimate realities, in contrast, are things that exist by reason of their own intrinsic nature. So here you have this word swabhava. But one has to be careful with regard to this word, right? We have been discussing about it already. That even though you can separate the dharmas mentally, they do not exist on their own. They do not function on their own. These are the dharmas, the final irreducible components of existence, the ultimate entities, which result from a correctly performed analysis of experience. Yeah. How do you get these dharmas? It is from your analysis, and this analysis of experience should be done correctly. So that means through your meditative practice, you come to know about these dharmas fully well. Such existence admit of no further reduction, but are themselves the final terms of analysis. The true constituents of the complex manifold of experience. Hence, the word Paramatma is applied to them, which is derived from Parama, that is ultimate, highest or final, and Atha means reality or thing. Things that have ultimate validity. The ultimate realities are characterized not only from the ontological angle as the ultimate existence, but also from the epistemological angle as the ultimate objects of right knowledge. Okay. So what is the purpose of this analysis? It's not just for the sake of analysis, you are doing the analysis only, right? Not just to see how things function ontologically, but they are the objects of right knowledge, ultimate objects of right knowledge. Not just for the sake of analyzing the world on the ultimate level, but to have a better understanding or clearer understanding of the world. As one extracts oil from sesame seed, so one can extract the ultimate realities from the conventional realities. For example, being and man and woman are concepts suggesting that the things they signify possess irreducible ultimate unity. Right? So this is a mistake. However, when we wisely investigate these things with the analytical tools of the Abhidhamma, we find that they do not possess the ultimacy implied by the concepts, but only a conventional reality as an assemblage of impermanent factors of mental and psychical processes. Thus, by examining the conventional realities with wisdom, we eventually arrive at the objective actualities that lie behind our conceptual constructs. It is these objective actualities, the dharmas, which maintain their intrinsic natures independently of the mind's constructive functions, that form the ultimate realities of the Abhidhamma. So you can make use of these conventional terms, but as soon as you have this idea of irreducible ultimate unity being present in this, appearances, that is a mistake. The purpose of Abhidhamma is to analyze and provide you correct information. Yeah. Thus, by examining the conventional realities with wisdom, we eventually arrive at the objective actualities that lie behind our conceptual construct. Objective actualities. So I think this is very important to note here. These dhammas represent objective actualities. They are no more subjective. Now these dharmas, for example, when there is a discussion of 89 types of chittas or 52 chetasikas, 28 types of rupas, they are not just for those people who have, come up with this number of dhammas in their practice. It is for everyone. If you take up the path, you experience the same thing. Otherwise, for different people, the number of dhammas would be different also. Although ultimate realities exist as the concrete essence of things, they are so subtle and profound that an ordinary person who lacks training cannot perceive them. Such a person cannot see the ultimate realities because his mind is obscured by concepts, which shape reality into conventionally defined appearances. So this is the problem. You see, It doesn't matter how much, well and, clearly the states of dharmas or the realization of these enlightened beings are presented to us, because we are filled with our own conditioning. We are going to always understand it from our own conditioning, own perspective. So therefore, it is said that although ultimate realities exist as the concrete essence of things, they are so subtle and profound that an ordinary person who lacks training cannot perceive them. So it also suggests that if we have necessary training, we are able to perceive them, right? So what do you need? Yonisu Manasikara. By means of wise or thorough attention to things, can one see beyond the concepts and take the ultimate realities as one's object of knowledge. Yonisu Manasikara. This is a very important expression that is present even within the suttas also, right? Ayonisu Manasikara and Yonisu Manasikara. Mindful attention and unmindful attention, right? What does it mean by mindful attention? How do you do that? What do you do in meditation normally? Yeah. It's just knowing whatever thoughts arising in your mind, whatever feelings, whatever bodily sensation, just noting them, right? Without judgment. Without judgment. Now it needs a constant practice. You do the same thing every day for a certain amount of time. To sharpening the mind. You make it a habit. So normally in many meditation centers, they ask you to, the masters ask you to focus on your breath, right? Because it is an easily available thing that you have. And without making judgment, you can focus on this. You cannot say that my breath is bad or good, pleasant, unpleasant, right? It is just your breath. So that is why that is considered as a starting point. Focus on your breath. Your mind goes here and there. Bring it back to your breath. So this is a training. I mean, to focus on a specific object, right? Constantly, again and again, to sharpening the mind.
Like what I do is I count 1 to 10 times.
Yeah, some people do that. So commitment is also necessary. As you said, mind goes here and there, right? Then one needs to understand clearly. It is like you have to remind yourself that no, this is important. It doesn't matter what is going on where, or what I have to do tomorrow, what I have done yesterday, but at this moment, this is what is important. If you can give importance to that moment, you bring back your mind again. It is a training, as I said. You are not successful at one attempt. So Yunisu Manasikara means paying full and complete attention to things. Okay, so it needs effort, right effort. Okay, yeah. Thus, Paramatma is described as that which belongs to the domain of ultimate or supreme knowledge. So once you pay close attention, once you practice Yunisu Manasikara, the ultimate realities will be apparent to you. Okay, will appear before you. You will have a direct understanding of these ultimate realities. Altogether fourfold. In the suttas, the Buddha usually analyzes a being or individual into 5 types of ultimate realities, the 5 aggregates. So in the sutta, you can consider in the sutta terms, you can consider this as ultimate realities as well. Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, right? In the Abhidhamma teaching, the ultimates are grouped into the 4 categories enumerated in the text. So it is the enumeration of these same aggregates that you can find in the sutta are categorized as fourfold in the Abhidhamma. The first 3, consciousness, mental factors, and matter, that is Chitta, Chaitasika, and Rupa, comprise all conditioned realities, Sankhata Dhamma, right? The 5 aggregates of the Suttanta teaching fit within these 3 categories. How? The aggregate of consciousness here is comprised by consciousness. So when you say Chitta, it is the Vijnana, right? Vijnana Kanda. The word Chitta generally being employed to refer to different classes of consciousness distinguished by their concomitants. Same Chitta, because of its association with different concomitants means Chaitasika, the same Chitta becomes different, right? 89 types or 121, right? The middle 3 aggregates. What are the middle 3 aggregates? Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara. In the Abhidhamma, all included within the category of mental factors, Chaitasika. So Vijnana Kanda become Chitta, category of Chitta, consciousness. Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara come under the category of Chaitasika. Now here, mental states that arise along with consciousness performing diverse functions. The Abhidhamma philosophy enumerates 52 mental factors. Aggregate of feeling, Vedana Kanda, and perception, Sanya Kanda. They are counted as 2, right? 1 Vedana, 1 Sanya. Sankhara is counted 50. Okay. The aggregate of mental formation, that is Sankhara Kanda, of the suttas is finally subdivided into 50 mental factors. So you have 52. 3 Kanda, Vedana Kanda, Sanya Kanda, Sankhara Kanda become 52 Chaitasikas in the Abhidhamma. The aggregate of matter is, of course, identical with the Abhidhamma category of matter, which will later be subdivided into 28 types of material phenomena. To these 3 types of reality, which are conditioned, is added a 4th reality, which is unconditioned. What is this 4th reality? Yes, that reality which is not included in the 5 aggregates is Nibbana, the state of final deliverance from the suffering inherent in conditioned existence. Thus, in the Abhidhamma philosophy, there are altogether these 4 ultimate realities, consciousness, mental factors, matter, and nibbana. Yeah. Now, here is a discussion of consciousness. So first we are going to discuss about the first type, first of the four realities, consciousness, right? So far what we know is that in the Abhidhamma, four types of realities, Chitta, Chetasika, Rupa, and Nibbana. And if you compare it with, compare these four types with 5 aggregates in the Sutta, what do you find? Vijnana Kanda represent Chitta, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara come in the category of Chetasika, Rupa represent Rupa, 28 types of Rupa, and then Nibbana is not present in the 5 aggregates, right? It is added for the purpose of enumeration, explanation. And now we are going to focus on Chitta. Now, when you focus on Chitta, it says Chatubhida Chitta, 4 classes of consciousness. This consciousness or Chitta can be understood in terms of 4 classes. Okay, when it says 4 classes, that means 4 groups again, 4 categories. In terms of a sphere, avachara. So what it says here, let us read it together. Tata chittang tawa chatubhidang hoti kamavacharang rupavacharang arupavacharang lokuttaran chati. As kamavachara, rupavachara, arupavachara, and lokuttara, it is fourfold or 4 types. Of them, consciousness firstly is fourfold: sense sphere consciousness, fine material sphere consciousness, immaterial sphere consciousness, supramundane consciousness. I would suggest that the important terms, the key terms of classification and all these things, note down. Okay, so that later on you do not have to, look for these terms and you would get confused. Okay. Okay. Now, when you talk about consciousness, what does it mean? What does it mean by Chitta? So here is an explanation. The first chapter of the Abhidhamma Sangha is devoted to an examination of Chitta, consciousness or mind, the first of the 4 ultimate realities. Consciousness is taken up for study first because the focus of the Buddhist analysis of reality is experience, and consciousness is the principal element in experience, that which constitutes the knowing or awareness of an object. So here it provides the reasoning for taking up consciousness as the first topic of discussion. The focus of the Buddhist analysis, as it is mentioned here, is the reality of experience. And when you talk about experience, it is necessarily connected to your knowing and awareness. If you do not know something, you do not experience, right? So your experience exists only in relation to your cognition, your knowing. And Chitta represents that knowing, that cognition. The Pali word Chitta is derived from the verbal root Chitti, to cognize, to know. The commentators define Chitta in 3 ways. So all these 3 definitions are important: as agent, as instrument, and as activity. As agent means as a knower, important factor in knowing something. There are Chetasikas and so on, but Chitta functions as an agent. It is like a king with his soldier retinue, right? King is the supreme. In the same way, Chitta even though accompanied by so many chetasikas, Chitta is the supreme. So it is functioning in terms of agent. As instrument, when it becomes an instrument for the chetasikas to make something known, and as an activity, as mere activity, as an event. As the agent, chitta is that which cognizes an object. Aramanang chintatiti chittang. That which cognizes an object. As an instrument, chitta is that by means of which the accompanying mental factors cognize the object. Etena chintatiti chittang. So chitta and chetasika always go together. That you have to keep in mind. Even though here the discussion focuses on chitta only, chitta and chetasika always go together. Chitta cannot function without chetasika. Chetasika cannot function without chitta. But when it says chitta functions as an agent, it means it is the main factor that is cognizing an object. When it is described in terms of instrument, that means it is helping, assisting, or accompanying the mental factors, chetasika, to have an understanding of an object. As an activity, chitta is itself nothing other than the process of cognizing the object. So this is another way of looking at it. Chintana mattang chittang. The mere act of cognition. The action that takes place, the action itself, the functioning itself. Knowing itself or cognizing itself as an act, that is called chitta. The third definition in terms of sheer activity is regarded as the most adequate of the three. That is, chitta is fundamentally an activity, a process of cognizing or knowing an object. It is not an agent or instrument possessing actual being in itself, apart from the activity of cognizing. The definitions in terms of agent and instrument are proposed to refute the wrong view of those who hold that a permanent self or ego is the agent and instrument of cognition. The Buddhist thinkers point out, by means of these definitions, that it is not a self that performs the act of cognition, but chitta or consciousness. This chitta is nothing other than the act of cognizing, and that act is necessarily impermanent, marked by rise and fall. Yeah. So even though there are three definitions provided, all three are connected. It is just presenting the functioning of chitta in three different ways. If you take chitta as an agent and instrument, you may have the belief that chitta is something that is an entity, right? But in actual sense, it is just the process of knowing that is going on. It's just the process of knowing or cognizing. And it is marked by rise and fall, arising and ceasing, arising and ceasing, right? So the third definition is the most suited for our study of Abhidharma. That is how we should take it. That is what is intended here by the Acharya Anuruddha as mere activity. So with that, I think we can end our discussion here. We'll continue from here in the next classes, but we have to move faster. And for that, again, I ask you to read through this book, okay? If it is possible, by next week, we will complete our discussion on Chitta.